Have you read or heard news stories about a killer asteroid may hit the Earth? And are you wondering, should you be worried? Is there any truth to those sensational headlines? Well, in this video, we're going to examine just that. So stay tuned and we'll get to the bottom of, is there any truth in killer asteroids hitting the Earth? Hi, I'm Monte, the host of Savvy Life Strategies, where we produce a video just like this every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I invite you to subscribe and click the notification bell to get more videos just like this. Now, why should you believe what I'm about to tell you? Well, it turns out I'm a physicist. I've worked in the high-tech field of integrated circuits for over 30 years. Making some of the United States' most advanced weapon systems, and I've also written 4 science books, one of them on astrophysics actually. So I'm going to share what I know, and I'll put a link in the description so you can look at my credentials and judge for yourself. Now let's talk about, will a killer asteroid hit the Earth? And for that we're going to look at NASA's latest data. And I'm going to be referring to my notes, and as I do, I will occasionally look down to refer to them. But at the same time, I will put on the screen what I'm looking at so you can follow right along with me. Well, let's start with some facts so we have a common understanding. First, what's an asteroid? Well, it's essentially a rock, and they have different compositions, just like rocks on Earth. Most of them are in what's called the asteroid belt, and that's a belt of these asteroids, a lot of these rocks, about over 600,000 of them, that are orbiting the sun, much the same way we orbit the sun, and that asteroid belt is between Jupiter and Mars. So we're looking at a lot of asteroids, over 600,000. There are also comets, and these comets also orbit the sun, and they differ from asteroids in that a comet is made up of generally frozen water and frozen carbon dioxide, and that's why you see a long tail. That tail is the melting of the comet, and that's why it looks like it has this long tail as it's going by. Well, it's actually melting. So think of it like a big snowball that's melting as it's flying through space. Now, let's start. I'm going to just refer to my notes. Let's start with 2009. NASA launched what they called the Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer Telescope, or WISE for short. And its initial mission was a little fuzzy. It was to find things, whatever that meant. Well, apparently they didn't have a very well-defined mission, and for a while they even put it into hibernation. That telescope, the WISE telescope, uses infrared. Now you might say, well, why would they use infrared? We don't see infrared. As humans, we can't see infrared. It's not part of the visible spectra. Infrared is good because almost everything gives off a heat signature. And when it does, it's giving off infrared radiation. So planets, for example, which are very hard to spot. It's very hard to spot a planet because unlike a star, a planet doesn't give off light. So in order to spot these asteroids, this infrared is a very good technology because the asteroids don't have to give off visible light. Just the fact that they give off heat is enough for this type of telescope to spot them. Now, that particular telescope got a new mission in 2013, and that new mission was to look for near-Earth objects. So the WISE telescope is now called NEOWISE, N-E-O-W-I-S-E. Well, you might say that's interesting, so what? And I can understand why you would say that, because we haven't gotten much information until April. And in April, NASA released their fourth assessment. So that's April 2018, their fourth assessment. And what they discovered a lot of asteroids and even some comets, etc. But what is interesting is they found 788 near-Earth objects, and 136 of those were comets. Whoa, you might say near-Earth objects. What are we talking about here? We're talking about a collision of a killer asteroid or something like that? Well, not really. Their definition of near is a little unusual. Not in terms of astronomical types of measurements, but in terms of the measurements that we typically are used to hearing. They consider a near-Earth object that is anything within 30 million miles, that orbits within 30 million miles of the Earth. So that's a near-Earth object. Now, for example, our moon is 250,000 miles from the Earth. So when we talk about 30 million miles from the Earth, we're talking about objects that are really a long way from the Earth, but they're still considered near-Earth objects because at times their orbit intersects the orbit of the Earth. Now, of these near-Earth objects that they found, they only considered 10 as being listed as potentially hazardous. Now, what does that mean? Let's define potentially hazardous. It means that the object can get as close as 4.65 million miles from the Earth, and that's considered a potentially hazardous object. Well, now you might be saying, whoa, this doesn't sound too good. Maybe we are going to get hit by an asteroid. Well, it turns out that to the best of our knowledge, none of them really represent a threat in terms of hitting the Earth. And even if one did, when we look at the size of them, they're not big enough to wipe out humanity. That's not to say they wouldn't do a lot of damage, but they've only found about 10 or so that are 0.6 of a mile or bigger. Now, the one that wiped out the dinosaurs 65 million years ago, that was about a mile-wide asteroid. Now, when the asteroid hits the Earth, it comes in at about 27,000 miles per hour. That's about 12 miles per second. And that detonation, when it hits the Earth, is like a nuclear weapon going off. As a matter of fact, they've actually calculated what would happen if a meteor about 0.6 of a mile in diameter or even larger hits the Earth. Well, it would be like 1,450 nuclear weapons, or megatons of nuclear weapons going off at once. And that's more megatons of nuclear weapons than we have detonated so far. So it would be like one gigantic nuclear explosion. It would be a really, really bad day on Earth, and that could be the end of humanity as we know it, and the end of life on Earth as we know it. But as I said, the current thinking and the trajectories that we have, the orbits that we're looking at, they're not worried about an asteroid that size hitting the Earth. It doesn't look like we're going to have that kind of thing. As a matter of fact, the scientists at NASA are about 95% certain that they've found most of the large meteors, asteroids I should say, that could intersect with Earth. And they do not expect any of them to have an impact over the next 100 years. Now you may say, wait a minute, I just read about this asteroid called Bennu, and that it might impact the Earth. Well, there's a very small chance that that's possible. It's about a 1 in 27,000 shot. Now, that's not totally impossible. It's 1 in 27,000. Now let's put that in perspective. Your chance of being hit by lightning is roughly 1 in a million. However, about in the United States, about 35 to 40 people a year get hit by lightning. Your chance of winning the lottery is something like 1 in 14 million, yet every year people win the lottery. So 1 in 27,000, it's a significant probability. But as far as they know, plotting the trajectories and knowing about 95%, they're confident that they know about 95% of the major asteroids that could be hazardous to us. They believe that there is no cause for concern, that we're unlikely to see an impact in the next 100 years. Now, that's not to say that we couldn't be surprised by this 5% that we don't know about, or that there's a smaller asteroid similar to the one that crashed in Russia. And that asteroid was called the Chelyabinsk, and I'll put that up on the screen and you could try to pronounce the Russian. But that actually came in as a surprise. It wasn't a very big asteroid. It was 55 feet in diameter. It exploded in the atmosphere. So there were no deaths from that atmosphere, but there were a lot of people were injured and hospitalized. But fortunately, from my research, I haven't found that anyone was actually killed by that asteroid. But that came out of the blue. So it does say, hey, there is 5% out there that we don't know about. And there are smaller ones that could come popping in at any time. And of course, one hits a major city, that could be a serious problem. So we're not out of the woods entirely, but saying that we're going to have a killer asteroid destroy the Earth, that we're pretty much out of the woods. Let me give you my 4 conclusions. Conclusion 1 is that experts estimate that an impact of an object the size of one that exploded over that Chelyabinsk in Russia takes place about once or twice every century, so not too frequently. Conclusion 2, impacts of larger objects are expected to be far less frequent, and they're saying that it's in the scale of centuries to millennia. Conclusion 3, given the current incompleteness of our near-Earth orbit catalog, an unpredictable impact, such as the one that took place in Russia, could occur at any time. Conclusion 4, no known asteroid poses a significant risk of impact with Earth over the next 100 years. The highest risk of impact for a known asteroid is 1 in 714. It's a 1 in 714 chance. And that asteroid is called the 2009 FD. And if it is going to impact, the impact date they have is 2185, meaning that the possibility that it could impact then is a 1 in 714, which means it has a 0.2% chance of impacting the Earth. So basically, my conclusions as a physicist, as an author, and a man of science is that, yeah, we could have smaller asteroids come out of the blue and sort of impact the Earth, and maybe some of them might even be tragic, but it's unlikely that any the size of 0.6 of a mile or larger, the type of asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs, that's very unlikely to occur. So we don't really have to worry about these killer asteroids that we see in the headlines. A lot of that is just sensational journalism. Now, if you found this video informative, give it a thumbs up so that other people know it's a good video. And hit the subscribe button if you haven't already subscribed to get more videos just like this. Also, be sure to click the notification bell, and that way you'll be notified as soon as the videos are published. Now, until we have a chance to talk again, stay savvy and live well.